Okie dokie. We are back with Biblically Centered Podcast, episode number 7. Yeah, we got that right. Episode number 7. Happy to be here.
Yes.
I know it probably hasn't been that long, but it feels like it's been a minute.
Yeah, it does.
At least 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, it's been almost a whole week. Life happens.
You want to hit us with your mission statement?
Of course. Biblically Centered equips your family with knowledge and conversations for you to live and defend your Christian faith.
Very nice.
Thank you.
And what do we got? What do we got going on today? Anything exciting?
Well, today we are wrapping up the 4th of our first category. So that was the authority category, is virtues 1, 2, 3, and 4. So today's number 4. So that means next week we start a new category and move on to our 5th virtue. So there should be 2 episodes next week.
Ooh, bonus episode.
Yeah.
I like that.
Kind of fun. So we'll keep the next category on the DL, I guess.
Yeah, very
Not
secret,
to,
very
but-
close to the chest. But it will be revealed in due time.
Yes. Should we also announce some other fun news?
Well, yeah, I love fun news. Go for it.
Okay, well, perfect. I was going to announce that through God working and putting people and us all in the right spot, we were able to create and put out a 4-day Bible reading plan on the Bible app.
Yes. So, yeah, if you have the YouVersion Bible app on your phone,
Well, I think it's just Bible app. I mean, I know it is YouVersion, but I think when I've searched it, that isn't in there anymore.
oh, you don't have to
Isn't it?
search for YouVersion?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think you just search Bible app.
Okay, the Bible app.
I think, yeah, just the main one. If it looks like a Bible and says the Holy Bible on it,
Mm-hmm.
that's the one.
The brown little square that says Holy Bible.
Yeah.
That's the one. But yes, we have a plan in there.
We do.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the plan?
Sure. So you can search, we have it under Biblically Centered, but the plan is called View Popular Culture Through a Biblical Lens. And so last summer we created kind of a guide for you to do with your family for like family movie night to help lead your kids through how to like gain critical thinking and think about it in a biblical manner, everything you're taking in. And so, yeah, we were able to write one. And so it's not aimed at for kids. I mean, although they could read it and be fine, but it's for adults. So yeah, it's a 4-day reading plan. And so every day there's like a challenge to do to just kind of get you starting to think that way, to kind of think like what is beautiful or true about what I'm seeing or listening or reading, and then, what is showing idolatry and, what is pointing away, and then how does God's redemption story kind of show through that. So obviously it is not permission for you to go watch any movie. I don't think that's what we're saying, but we're saying like in everything you're taking in, there is a worldview behind it. And it's really good to be thinking while you're taking in that.
Yes.
Yeah. So not to just accept it. And I mean, for our kids, it's been really helpful.
It is very helpful.
Yeah. To just get them thinking like, was that a good choice? Did they do that well? Does this actually follow, what the Bible says? And, it's been really good.
It's been really good.
Yeah.
And the Bible plan is great.
Yes. So that's, again, it's called View Popular Culture Through a Biblical Lens. It's like a neon yellow.
Are we able to link a Bible plan?
I don't know, because it's like.
I'll superimpose the image right here. So for
Okay,
those of you
perfect.
who are watching on YouTube, you can actually see what it looks like, and I'll put that in.
Okay. Yeah.
So people can
That
at
would
least
be
see what it
awesome.
looks like. But yeah, so do that. That'd be great.
Yeah.
And share it, rate it.
And at the end, it does link to the kids version that you can download.
Oh,
So
cool.
if you go
Okay.
through it and
Yeah.
then you're like, oh my gosh, I would love to use this. And then in the one you download, it actually walks you through a kids movie and how that looks and conversations you could have with your kids. Yeah. Super exciting.
But yeah, it was very exciting when that became live. So hopefully we'll be able to do more in the future as time
Yes.
goes on. But it's a great first one. So
Yeah.
Rate it.
Sure.
Rate
Share
this
it.
podcast.
Yes.
Like it, follow, all that stuff just helps get it out there on the interweb. So if you find value in it, all those things help us. So
yes.
Yeah. Great job.
Thanks. Yeah. Super exciting. Okay, so let's move in to today's virtue.
Let's do it.
Virtue number 4. It says, we attentively listen to our parents and honor their God-given authority. So
this is the fun one. Listening to your parents.
Yeah. So it seems a little straightforward, but we're going to kind of approach it from more of like a parenting, like how should we parent this virtue? Because I think that's really important to understand, like our role. And we do have like it's God-given authority, and we've talked about that before. God gives all authority, and so we've been given authority over our children, but obviously we're supposed to steward and do that well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're not authoritative, but we're not just pushovers either, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some definitions. Again, we all love definitions. So honor is like reverence, revere, respect, treat with submission. Obedience is compliance with a command. And so the performance of what is required by the authority, or it can also mean abstaining from what is prohibited. So it's just, again, about having reverence and respect for someone, and then obviously obedience, compliance. I know we say a lot of times to our kids, like we obey promptly, which is hard for them sometimes, but that's what we're trying to get in them. Like, no, we do obey, because I think part of this goes into trust. Like we can trust those people. So our children are learning to trust us as the authority in our life. Yeah. So, obviously everyone knows, or I'm sure you do, but if not, Exodus 20:12, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land, and that the Lord your God is giving you. And so that is actually the only commandment to contain a promise, which I think is just really cool. Yeah.
And then Proverbs 1:8-9 says, hear, my son, your father's instruction, and forsake not your mother's teaching, for they are a graceful garland for your head and pendants for your neck.
Yeah.
Which speaks to me.
I just love visuals, and I don't know. I find beauty in that. It's not just like this and this. It's like, no, this actually is going to be beautiful and enhance your life and make people notice. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I think, there's an aspect of today's culture, and this isn't new. I think it's always been prevalent, kind of the cool phase that people go through of like not listening to their parents and doing whatever they want. And for some people that's a small stretch of time, and for some people they're still doing that in their adult lives. But there is a countercultural aspect to it that the Bible talks about, where like truthfully in the long run it is a more noble and beautiful thing to honor your parents. And so, I might not be going around sporting a necklace all the time.
No, but I think it just naturally can exude from people. I mean, if you have reverence and honor for your parents, I think you're going to naturally show that to other people. So teachers, pastors, policemen, you're just automatically going to just...
Yeah, it starts in the home.
Right. Yes.
Sure.
So this is just an example. And parents, we are to be an example of also how to obey an authority. So it's not like the buck stops here. It's like, no, it actually begins here, because we're showing you how we're going to obey God. And so there is a little bit of that transparency that I think you have to have, which sometimes can be really hard as a parent to kind of give your cards of like, oh, there's actually someone over me. But that's so good for your kids, because then when they leave your house, it's not like, yay, I'm away from mom and dad. They're like, oh, now I have to obey God on my own, kind of a thing.
Yeah. And I know we hit on that in one of the previous episodes. But yeah, it is important for our kids to know that when it comes to authority, yes, it's important that they honor their parents and that we honor our parents. But yeah, that ultimately the ultimate authority is God. And that we listen, and when God speaks, hopefully we act, and that our kids can see that.
Yeah. So Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he shall go, even when he is old, he will not depart from it. And so it's all about kind of our moral orientation. In the virtue before, we said, we seek God's absolute truth. So we're seeking just to show them that, no, our truth, our morality, everything is rooted and focused and centered around Christ. And so we're pointing to the kinds of conduct that pleases and then also displeases God. And so it's love, instruction, and also consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, it's not an official verse, but I do feel like that verse is a little bit of a cornerstone verse for biblically centered, because we do want to train our children up, and our hope and our prayer is that when they are older and they have that responsibility and that independence outside of the home, that they are able to continue, choosing this life that, so. And again, I know I'll probably say it every episode. I'm sorry. It can just be my catchphrase, but just the importance of that foundation and it being strong, and for them to continue to have the reinforcements, and that strong foundation of, various verses and these virtues that can continue to point them, into the right direction, because we all know that the questions will come.
Yeah.
But the hope is that, the strength and the foundation that they have will be able to carry them through those times in their life.
For sure. Well, and I hope that as we're layering, I mean, I don't think parenting will ever get easier, but maybe it will be more of, right now we're just really giving them this step by step by step. And our hope is that we're laying these foundations step by step. But then, as they get older, it's not so much of I know I said earlier, like an authoritative or dictatorship, but it's really more of, we're working together to really solidify your faith. So when they get older, they're really, okay, what does this mean? How do I live this out? And they're really trying to put that into place when they are entering, that wisdom stage, that 12 and up. So it's just, it might, when it's 0 to 6, it might just feel really daunting because you might repeat yourself a lot, which we find repeating ourselves a lot. But it's going to be worth it, and those conversations are going to change. So maybe, our hope is obviously when they're teenagers, it's not maybe disobedience, but maybe it's more the posture of their heart at that point. So you're still working. It's maybe just not going to look the same at every point, and so that's why we have those kind of levels, so that you can really continue layering, and really digging into it. So when they are high schoolers, it's more about like, what does this mean? How can I defend this? How can I really live this and show my relationship with Christ?
Yeah, it's invaluable, and it's very important. And I know that we've discussed this a little bit, that we do, this kind of Bible time with our kids in the evenings, after dinner. And there are times where you don't feel like you're getting through, and there's times where you have to dig a little bit deeper. And I mean, I really feel like, especially with our 6-year-old, that she is wanting to listen, and she's wanting to understand and have answers. And I've also appreciated that when we ask her a question about the story and she doesn't get it, she just is like, I don't know what that word means.
Yeah.
And then it allows us to go a little bit deeper. So I've appreciated that time, and I feel like it's been very beneficial for them and for us.
Yes. And I mean, even if our 4-year-old tonight said he didn't know the answer because he wasn't listening, and that was true. But we weren't we weren't overly upset. We knew he was just having difficulty with that. Yeah. But even in that moment, he was like, oh, I should have listened because I don't know what I'm supposed to be saying. But he's still seeing just the habit of it. So he just knows this is what we do. And tonight he maybe.
Yeah. And I'm thankful they never, at least up to this point, they haven't really put up a fuss or anything about us doing this time. Like, especially our daughter will make sure that we're doing it. you know.
She loves coloring pictures, so we
Mhm.
give her a picture to color, and there you go.
And she'll just kind of sit there
She's good.
quietly and color while we go through the
Mhm.
story. So
Yes. So, all right. So yes, so we're talking about not drudgery in parenting, which I stay at home. That gets a little, that can be hard, but we're ultimately trying to find joy. And so we're about to kind of talk about kind of ownership versus being an ambassador in your parenting,
Mhm.
which for me, I think has really helped kind of frame that a little bit better. Just recently preparing for this, kind of reading back over some of my material, but so ownership, if you have a parental role as ownership, you're trying to, I didn't word this well. So ownership is what we want for our children and then from our children. So however, our children they don't actually belong to us. They're God's possession for his purpose. So ownership it's about your children. They have to be meeting things, or you find approval and contentment and joy and happiness from what they're doing. So it's kind of like, well, and I know you say this a lot. It's like the thermostat versus the thermometer. Yes. So we want to set the temperature, not them. So in an ownership parenting, you're kind of taking it from them. Kind of, does that make sense? I think so. And then, so what we are trying to develop or become is an ambassador role as a parent. So we want to faithfully represent the message, methods, and character of the leader who has sent us. And so obviously that's God. He sent us. He's given us our children, which are blessings from the Lord. And so, so what does God in his grace have planned to do through us in our children? So it kind of more marries, like, the ownership is more dependent on the child and how they're behaving, and the ambassador is almost more on us. Like, how am I making sure that I'm doing what I need to do so that they're able to get what they need from God? So it's more based on that relationship than an ownership.
Yeah.
Which that concept, I mean, I've heard it before a lot, but recently I've been reading.
So is the distinction there like an owner being like with the mindset like this is mine, these are mine, whereas an ambassador is like, I'm here on behalf of the Lord,
Yes.
and this is my responsibility to raise these kids.
Yes.
Yes,
because if you take more of the owner role, then it kind of rises and falls on what your children. So if you take them to Target and they have a meltdown, you're like, oh no, I wasn't able, like they just didn't meet my expectations. And it's about you and your perception and what people are, it's very much can get, like you can almost feel attacked by your own children, I guess, in that way of like, they're not doing what I told them to do, or they're, it's very much that tension. And so I think an ambassador role kind of takes that away, because it's like, well, yeah, obviously they're not always going to do what, but as an ambassador, I'm supposed to still offer them grace. I'm supposed to still show them love and mercy. I'm still supposed to show them compassion, but then I do have to make sure, obviously, some correction does come, but it's maybe thought out a little bit more, is kind of how I like view those two differently.
There's an eternal scope in mind for sure.
Yes. So an ambassador is just like, they're mine for a moment, And I think also just keeping in mind, like, we are parents, but we're also being parented by God. And so I think just always kind of coming back to that of like, how do I want God to respond when I make a mistake? Okay, I should show that same grace to my children. Am I responding quickly to God? In those moments, there's kind of that push and pull. But anyways, for me, kind of thinking about it in those terms has helped me.
Yeah. I think that's great.
So this concept, again, I've heard it before, but recently I was reading back over last year. You've heard I read a mountain of books. So I'm kind of reading over, making sure I really got it all in me. But the book Parenting by Paul David Tripp, he just speaks beautifully about parenting. And so a quote from his book is, "Your work as a parent is a thing of extreme value because God has designed that you would be a principled, consistent, and faithful tool in his hands for the purpose of creating God consciousness and God submission in your children." And I really loved that God consciousness. I think sometimes we can get caught up of like, yes, our family is Christian and we go to church and we pray and do all these things, but then you have to really think about like, these are children who are still sinners, and until we see that act of repentance and salvation in their life, sin is still going to be the reigning, like the reigning not a force, but like the reigning mindset to them, before they're really able to enter that sort of justification and sanctification. So I think just knowing like, just awaiting for that hope for them. So we're always pointing them back to God.
Yeah. And it's important in that quote to, for me at least, I know we all take away different things, but like that aspect of, like we are a tool being used by God.
Yeah.
And so like we have that as our backing and our comfort, to know that like God has commissioned us for this responsibility of raising our children. And, some of us might not feel like we're qualified for this, or, maybe we don't have the experience or the expertise or heck, even, the financial stability that we'd want. But yet God has called us to this. And so if God has called us to this, then that means like the needs that we have to raise our children effectively, are all available to us.
Right.
So I think that's just an important mindset to have, because I know that parenting can get overwhelming. And, especially for us only having been parents for 6.5 years.
Yeah.
There's plenty we haven't experienced yet, but I know that, there's a lot of relying on God, and trusting God through the process.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, parenting is a lifelong connected process. And so I'm just also, I think, encouraged. I know we talk about like our Bible time, and then, we have Bible time in the morning for school, and then we go to like a Christian group once a week. And it's just those continual little moments over and over and over, with the drip by drip, layer by layer. It doesn't have to be rested on one monumental conversation. I think sometimes we can get caught up in that of like, this is the moment that I'm going to, give my child all this information. And then it's like, and then they pick their nose, and you're just like, that was supposed to be the moment, But I think we just have to remind ourselves it's continual, and it is little by little. So, I mean, again, it can feel mundane or repetitive, but it's refining. It's those little moments, little by little, that your kids are gonna get it, and they're gonna get it more, I think, over time than if it were just to be like, okay, this is our one conversation about authority. Like one time they could care less, but repetitiveness and little by little by little. I think I've heard it said you have to hear or see something like 7 times until you actually get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's true for me.
So, I mean, if that's true for adults, just think about kids, like I'm sure it takes, I haven't done the research, I'm sure it takes even more than that. How many times do they still not wash their hands right away? How many times do they still, touch something?
Wash their hands for the right amount of time.
Or like touch something they're not supposed to, or, like on and on and on. You feel like, I just told you this yesterday. And it's like,
yeah,
they're kids, and they're processing so much every day, all the time.
Well, and it's like just to, I don't know if it's been apparent on this podcast yet, but my brain works in metaphors. And so sometimes they don't always make sense. But like in this, it says like, we're imparting wisdom into our child drip by drip. And so it makes me think of coffee. And I'm not like a coffee connoisseur to the point to where like I'm like, if it didn't take an hour to slowly drip, then it's not good. Like I'll really drink whatever. But for the people who do have more of a palate for coffee and can taste the notes and can tell a difference in the brewing process and stuff like that, like in order to get a full-bodied, well-rounded cup of coffee, typically the slower drip kind of method of coffee, like the real sciencey kind of granular form to brewing coffee, is how you get that rich, full-bodied experience.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just need something quick, you can just pop in the Keurig and then get yourself a cheap, quick cup of coffee, cheap-ish, quick cup of coffee, and go about your day. But like there's a dessert shop in our town that has one of those, I don't even know what it's called, but it's like one of the coffee drips where it's like literally
yeah, it's like a whole wall.
Yeah, and it like spirals down
with like the glass
and
tubes.
slowly drips.
Yes.
And
it's
so
like
anyways,
they're working on tomorrow's coffee.
Yeah.
Today.
We're
working on tomorrow's children today.
Amen.
Woo.
But I like that, because like we are wanting to create our children or generate the potential in our children to be these well-rounded, responsible, understanding, compassionate, who understand these virtues and who understand Scripture. But that is a slow drip by drip process. It's not something I can tell my kids once today, and then when they do something contrary to that tomorrow, I'll be like, "Don't you get it? We talked about this yesterday."
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's instilling it drip by drip.
Yeah.
So that whenever they are in that place, the hope is that they'll be well-rounded.
Yeah.
Like a nice cup of coffee.
I just drink sugar with coffee.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who think they like coffee, but they really just like dessert.
Yes.
Because it's like you take a sip of their drink and it's like, you can't even taste the coffee. This just tastes like cream and sugar.
That's me.
I like coffee that does have cream and sweetener and that stuff in it, but I like to still be able to also taste the coffee, but I can drink it, black sometimes.
Yeah.
But typically my go-to is just coffee with a little bit of milk. That's it.
There you go.
Because I like the milk just because I like the fat in the milk that kind of rounds out the profile of the coffee.
Yeah.
It just gives it a little bit more depth. So we should start a coffee podcast. I'll get
Think
some people on here who know things about coffee.
Ooh, we know some of those people.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't have a lot to say on that, but I could sample.
They're like, "What's your favorite coffee?" Dutch Bros. Like, oh goodness.
Hey, that is really good. I got some this morning.
There's an addictive nature to their coffee.
It is. I got a large, so I'll finish it tomorrow. So that's actually, you get the big one. It's like 50 cents more. Boom. It lasts you 2 days. It's great.
Well, I saw the quote that's like, "Man, look at these lines of these coffee places. It's like they're selling a drug or something."
Well,
but they are. It's just legal. So
yeah.
Any Hoosers?
So
what are we talking about?
I know. We just drip by drip. There you go. This metaphor will be so burned into your memory. Every day you're going to be like, this is a drip. This is a drop into my kids' future biblical worldview, their future biblical virtue, into their future relationship with God. And that's the ultimate goal. Obviously, we want them to develop these other virtues because we believe they actually stem from knowing and having a relationship with God. So we think the outpouring of your relationship, we talked about reverence to God, and then we talked about, worship to Christ, and then we talked about, praying with the help of the Holy Spirit. And from those three really like cornerstone virtues, we believe all these, and obviously we said we stopped at 24. I think you could obviously keep, God is all things good, so any good and noble virtue can be.
But from the work that we put into this, the hope is that, while it is not all encompassing, that there is a lot of other aspects too, but that can still fit in the family of the virtues that we've established.
Yeah, for sure. So So this was virtue number 4 about honor and obedience and just, I mean, obviously today we kind of talked more about our kind of parent role in that. But I think that's important to remember because you're not going to drill it into them. You know, it really has to be a relationship with your child and with the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, and this is something, the Christian school that we went to at our chapels, they would say this phrase a lot. But like in teaching your kids, when it comes to honoring things, and this is outside of just honoring your parents, but just that concept of honor, and it's something I, try to ascribe to, is that, like, we don't honor our pastor or our parents or whoever or our teachers because they deserve it all the time.
Right.
It's because we honor them because we ourselves are honorable.
Right.
And so whenever you are honoring the authority in your life, that is speaking more to your character than it is to the position of that person in your life.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an important angle to look at it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think going back, that drip by drip method, I feel like that's just like a good life lesson because it's not just applicable to children, but it really is for like most things in life, because I think like we're trying to win the race and and like I know, this is just a phrase that pastors say that, life is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And there is like a long suffering aspect to it, that it does take time. And so like if you're starting a business or if you're, going to school or wanting to get your doctorate or whatever the goals you have in front of you, that like those things don't happen in an instant. And I think that's why we often see people who like win the lottery, for an example, statistically speaking, like 90% of them are bankrupt in a few years because that it wasn't the drip by drip instilling of value that created the wealth. It was, you got lucky, here's wealth, and then they're like, oh shoot, I don't know what to do this, I'm just going to buy everything I want, and then they just don't know how to handle it. So the drip by drip method is, in my opinion, the way that you accumulate and gain a life that's worth
well,
living.
And I think you can also just stop and think about yourself. I mean, when you read all these virtues, you have to honestly ask yourself, like, do I exemplify all these? And I would say, no, I fall short in a lot of these categories. In all of, like I would say, in any given day, I could probably fall short. But we are also being parented. And so it's in those moments where our kids will see us not follow them and be able to recover and just be like, I need God today. Like I need to revere him, and I didn't do that. And so that's why I let this happen. I mean, it's drip by drip for us too. And I don't think it will ever stop. It's always a refining process. I always laugh because I think we were told that marriage was really going to refine us, and it has. But having children, and I don't know why they left off at marriage. They should have said like, marriage will it'll do like a little bit. And then I feel like having kids has been like, oh, this is when I'm actually getting refined, because I have to they see and know everything. And it's really hard to be like, oh,
like always on.
Yes. I don't know where I was going with that, but it's hard.
Yeah. It is. And I mean, that's the good thing about these virtues that, have been worked on so diligently, is because it's a great resource for your kids. But again, it you learn a lot about yourself through the process. And so that's our hope, is that we as a couple are growing. Individually we're growing, and that, again, that growth in us and the learning in us and the wisdom that's being instilled in us is something that we can naturally flow into our children. Yeah.
All right. Well, there we go. We finished our authority category. I feel, way to go. I hope everyone.
Yeah. And again, we'll circle back to these. We're going to keep going through them. So, but yeah, as we continue to have new things available, we'll have a couple more things available this month that we're excited about.
Yes.
thank you everyone for listening. Danica, I'm going to give you the opportunity again, just like every episode, for last thoughts, final words.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone who's listening.
Yeah.
And again, everyone who does send the text or leave the comment or whatever, or the review with the kind words, always appreciated. So
Yes.
thank you.
Thanks.
And we will see ya on the flippity flop.